Tonight, we journey back to ancient Greece, that sun-drenched cradle of Western civilization, bathed in olive oil and philosophical musings, skewed north as the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and marble statues that somehow never discovered trousers. Yet, beneath this golden veneer of Platonic dialogues and Spartan warriors lies a harsher reality of daily existence, so demanding that even the most devoted classics professor might struggle to endure it. Before we begin our temporal voyage, I invite you to like this video and subscribe if you genuinely appreciate these historical journeys. I'm always curious, where are you watching from tonight? What time is it in your corner of the world? Share in the comments below as we create our own cross-time community. Now, dim your lights, perhaps activate that gentle background fan, and let's slip quietly into the past together. Dawn breaks over ancient Greece. Your day doesn't begin with a gentle alarm or morning coffee. It starts with relentless sunshine, transforming your modest dwelling into nature's own kill. Your home, constructed from sun-hardened mud, bricks, or roughly hewn stone, features windows so small they seem almost reluctant to admit light. There's no glass, merely wooden shutters that simultaneously guard against wandering goats and pray for merciful breezes. Insulation, central air, personal space. Foreign concepts in a world where your family goat might be your closest roommate. You rise with the sun, not from discipline, but necessity. Horizontal existence becomes unbearable as heat accumulates. Summer transforms your stone walls into thermal batteries, radiating stored heat into your bones by sunrise. Winter reverses this phenomenon, turning your sanctuary into a stone refrigerator where you huddle beneath thin sheets, fighting to avoid becoming a living statue to the god of frostbite. Your night's rest occurred on a thin mat or straw-stuffed pallet pillows, or luxuries replaced by a rolled cloak or your increasingly numb arm. If fortune smiled upon you, the lice granted a temporary armistice. More likely, they feasted. Without running water, your morning ablutions involve a trek to the public fountain, or, for rural dwellers, hauling water from the nearest well. You balance clay and pores on your shoulders, silently negotiating with fate not to stumble and shatter both pottery and your week's water supply. Morning bathing isn't part of your routine. That's an evening luxury, if it happens at all. Your cleansing ritual involves splashing your face before applying olive oil to your skin, then scraping it away with a stridula curved metal implement. Consider it an ancient spa treatment, minus the spa effectiveness or enjoyment. Privacy remains a theoretical concept. Your entire family shares a single room. You sleep together, eat together, and engage in domestic disputes about whose sandals tracked mud across the floor, while the street serves as your extended hallway, news service, and communal waste disposal. Before your first meal, your back already aches. Perspiration soaks your tunic, and fabric clings to anatomical regions where adhesion is distinctly unwelcome. Astonishingly, this represents the high point of your Hellenic day. Having survived your Grecian sleeping quarters, sustenance becomes the next priority. Welcome to breakfast in ancient Greece, a culinary experience so minimalist it makes modern intermittent fasting seem indulgent. Your morning repast consists primarily of barley bread called mazzadens, often stale, possessing all the gastronomic appeal of its mud brick architectural counterparts, created from ground barley mixed with water. These flat cakes bake on sun-heated stones, or in last night's fire ashes. Imagine a granola bar, stripped of flavor, texture, and nutritional enthusiasm. You dip this culinary masterpiece into watered-down wine, not for pleasure, but survival. The water supply lacks filtration systems, boiling protocols, or ceramic purification pitchers. Everyone from children to elders consumes diluted ONOs, not for intoxication, but to avoid waterborne illness. Affluent citizens might enhance their meal with figs, olives, or a modest portion of goat cheese. But prosperity likely eludes you. Consider yourself fortunate if your bread remains. uninhabited by yesterday's insects, and doesn't threaten dental integrity. Coffee, eggs, fresh fruit, and honey remain luxuries reserved for those with exceptional beekeeping connections or social influence. Mealtime etiquette prioritizes efficiency over enjoyment. There are no chairs, utensils, or mindfulness practices, simply consumption, acknowledgement, and immediate return to obligations. Women and children often eat separately after the men have finished, adding sequential disappointment to culinary underwhelm. The historical irony proves striking. These same Greeks who composed eloquent symposiums, elaborate banquets, and poetic tributes to wine considered breakfast unworthy of literary mention. It remains utilitarian, often charred, and consistently uninspiring. Yet you persevere through each dense mouthful, because this meager sustenance stands between you and a day filled with relentless sunshine, physical labor, and philosophical debates that somehow never address improved breakfast options. Having consumed your hardened barley brick and diluted wine, personal hygiene beckons, though hygiene represents a generous interpretation. In ancient Greece, cleanliness involved ritual and oil rather than actual sanitation. Soap remains a futuristic fantasy. Your morning ablutions typically involve pouring cold water over yourself at a public fountain or courtyard basin, unless you reside near a bathhouse in uncommon luxury. Modern amenities like shampoo, scented body wash, or bathing sponges don't exist. Instead, olive oil becomes your cleansing medium. You apply it liberally, not for moisturization, but to capture accumulated dirt and perspiration. You then scrape it away using a strigil, a curved bronze implement that leaves you marginally less oily, but questionably cleaner. The process resembles applying salad dressing before shaving it off your entire skincare regimen. This seemingly peculiar practice occurs communally, with participants frequently unclothed and conversational. Hygiene in ancient Greece embraces social interaction. Privacy remains conceptual rather than practical. Dental care presents further challenges. Toothbrushes and toothpaste haven't been invented. Advanced oral hygiene might involve rubbing charcoal on your gums or vinegar rinses for the sophisticated. Most citizens simply chew fibrous twigs and hope divine intervention preserves their molars. Body odor represents the olfactory background music of Greek society. Deodorant remains uninvented, though perfumes exist for the wealthy. You might apply myrrh or rose oil before undertaking a 5-mile journey through Athenian heat in leather sandals. The resulting fragrance combines notes of musk, dust, and existential resignation. Laundry occurs infrequently, involving beating garments against river rocks. If you occupy lower socioeconomic strata, your tunic likely hasn't encountered water since the previous religious festival. In essence, Greek hygiene practices aren't concerned with aesthetic or olfactory improvement, merely appearing marginally less revolting than the previous day. The oil and scrape methodology offers limited benefits when you're perspiring profusely beneath woolen garments in Mediterranean heat, while ancient Greece bequeathed us democracy, philosophical inquiry, and architectural marvels. Adequate bathing facilities remained perpetually under development. Fresh from your oil scraping ritual, dressing presents the next challenge. Your ancient Greek wardrobe epitomizes minimalism and impracticality simultaneously. Its options include the kitten or himadion, essentially oversized linen rectangles secured with brooches or belts. These garments lack tailoring, proper fitting, or wind resistance. An unexpected breeze might transform philosophical contemplation into unintentional exhibitionism. Underwear remains conceptually undiscovered. Brassieres haven't been invented. Unless you're a Spartan woman trained in athletics, you rely on secure pinning and hope your wardrobe maintains structural integrity throughout daily activities. Footwear presents another challenge. Fortunate citizens possess leather sandals. Quest-privileged individuals navigate barefoot across sun-baked stone, trampled earth, and market detritus. Imagine traversing a heated skillet while avoiding animal waste your daily commute encapsulated. Sun protection remains non-existent, no hats, unless you're an agricultural worker or sailor, and no sunscreen in 450 BCE, when scientific inquiry focuses on celestial spheres rather than UV protection. The Mediterranean sun demonstrates remarkable democratic principles. It scorches, cues, philosophers, and farmers with equal intensity. Cues, my midday, your shoulders redden, your feet accumulate urban grime, and your linen garments adhere to anatomically improbable locations. Public nudity generates minimal social discomfort. You might encounter men exercising unclothed at the gymnasium, or politicians delivering civic addresses in precariously secured togas. Affluent citizens might wear dyed garments, perhaps subtle purple or saffron yellow. Most wear undyed fabric in natural shades because colorants cost dearly, and society hesitates to invest premium dyes on individuals who repair fishing nets for sustenance. You navigate daily life resembling a mobile linen wrap, sunburned, perspiring, and hoping your garment maintains structural integrity before the local priestess. Most discouraging, your daily obligations have barely commenced. In ancient Greece, military service transcends occupation. It represents civic obligation, social expectation, and potential mortality. Free male citizens, particularly in Athens and Sparta, automatically enlist whether inclined toward martial pursuits or not. Adolescence introduces wooden weapon training and phalanx formation drills, that renowned Greek battle strategy involving shield to shield, proximity, and fervent hopes that adjacent soldiers maintain their footing. Spartan military indoctrination began at age 7 through the notorious Goj Systema regimen, transforming children into warriors through systematic deprivation, corporal punishment, and isolation until only the resilient survived. Athenian requirements proved less severe but equally mandatory. 2 years of intensive training followed by decades of military availability. Veterans received no health care, pensions, or psychological support, merely scars, mobility impairments, and occasionally modest grave markers celebrating courage and virtue. Female existence in ancient Greece presented even greater challenges. In most city-states, particularly Athens, women possessed fewer rights than decorative pottery. Political participation, public office, land ownership, and unescorted public appearances remained forbidden. Frequent, unaccompanied appearances might generate whispered accusations of courtesan status, or, more scandalously, Spartan sympathies. Your daily routine as a woman begins before sunrise. Responsibilities include wool spinning, cloth weaving, grain grinding, water collection, bread baking, slave management, and child rearing. You function as household administrator without compensation, recognition, or scheduled rest. Social engagement remains severely restricted. Theatrical performances, philosophical discussions, and gymnasium activities remain inaccessible. Your domain centers on the Gynekian, with external world glimpses filtering through latticed windows. Educational opportunities prove limited. Basic literacy, if fortunate, but primarily domestic skill development. Philosophy, rhetoric, and mathematics remain male intellectual territories. Your primary responsibility involves advantageous marriage, male heir production, and social invisibility throughout these functions. Marriages occurred during early adolescence. 2 significantly older men, arranged by fathers, who approach the process as commercial transactions rather than familial alliances. Emotional compatibility remains optional. Dowries remain obligatory. Childbearing establishes your primary social value. Sparta represented a notable exception. Spartan women received education, exercised publicly, and owned property. However, this comparative liberation stemmed from state-sponsored militarism and eugenics. Primary female responsibilities involved producing capable warriors or facing societal rejection. Widowhood brought restricted inheritance rights, controlled remarriage options, and rapidly diminishing social networks. Legal, social, and physical constraints defined female existence. While Greek mythology celebrated powerful goddesses Athena, Artemis, hieromortal women faced expectations of silence, domesticity, and public invisibility. Athens claims recognition as democracy's birthplace, technically accurate, but requiring substantial qualification before celebrating this political innovation. Consider eligibility requirements. Participation in the Athenian ecclesia required male gender, Athenian parentage, citizenship, and minimum age of 18. This excluded women, foreigners, slaves, and children, approximately 90% of the population. This wasn't universal democracy, but rather selective governance by a specific demographic of sun-exposed, sandal-wearing men. For eligible citizens, participation extended beyond voting to constant civic engagement. Legislation underwent proposal, debate, and ratification in massive assemblies with thousands of citizens. Professional politicians didn't exist. Every eligible male simultaneously functioned as legislator, juror, and enthusiastic amateur. Random selection through lottery determined powerful positions overseeing treasury management or judicial proceedings, an exciting prospect until considering the absence of qualification requirements. Your local fishmonger might administer military logistics. Your superstitious uncle might adjudicate capital crimes. Individuals became excessively influential, popular, or socially irritating. Ostracism provided recourse. Annual voting allowed citizens to inscribe names on pottery fragments and exile individuals for decade-long periods without trials or defensive opportunities. Popularity contests with severe geographic consequences. Despite evident limitations, Athenian democracy represented revolutionary political innovation. It provided ordinary men with political voice and established foundations for future governmental systems. However, it wasn't equitable or inclusive. Women remained silenced. Tax-paying foreign residents remained silenced. Slaves constructing architectural marvels remained silenced. Excessively inquisitive philosophers faced potential execution. Democracy originated in ancient Greece, but modern expectations of equal rights and political inclusion would have resulted in assembly ejection with instructions to bring personal pottery shards. Slavery in ancient Greece wasn't merely tolerated, it was institutionalized. Even modest households typically owned at least one slave, not through exceptional wealth, but because human ownership represented societal normalization, equivalent to sandal wearing or sun exposure. The concept of universal human liberty remained unimaginable. Slaves didn't represent specific ethnicities or racial groups. They originated from conquered territories: Thracians, Scythians, Syrians, and Greeks from conquered city-states. And entered slavery through birth, others through warfare, some through kidnapping and commerce. The slave trade flourished through brutal efficiency and constant demand. Athenian slaves performed comprehensive services: meal preparation, water collection, household maintenance, childcare, shopping assistance, and silent presence during meals. Some managed business affairs or household administration, while citizen owners attended symposiums, consumed diluted wine, and debated abstract justice concepts with profound irony. Laurian silver mines represented slavery's most horrific manifestation. Slaves, including children, labored in nightmarish conditions, navigating narrow tunnels in complete darkness, inhaling toxic particulates, creating slow mortality for monetary production and civic pride. Some slaves received education and performed intellectual functions, teaching, grammar, and mathematics, creating documents, managing financial accounts. Nevertheless, they remained property subject to physical abuse, branding, sale, or execution without legal protection. The limited population achieving freedom never attained complete liberty. They maintained obligations to former owners and faced citizenship exclusion. Voting rights and property ownership remained inaccessible, merely the aspiration for marginally improved circumstances. Unlike later enslaved populations, no significant abolitionist movement emerged. Philosophical luminaries like Aristotle justified slavery as natural necessity. According to his perspective, certain individuals were intrinsically destined for servitude. Ancient Greece provided ethical frameworks, democratic foundations, philosophical inquiries, while simultaneously establishing societal structures that systematically silenced, disenfranchised, and dehumanized substantial populations. This contradiction doesn't represent historical footnote, but foundational principle. Illness in ancient Greece presented substantial challenges, unless Hippocrates himself resided next door. Your healthcare options included vague herbal remedies, divine supplication, and optimistic thinking. Basic medical infrastructure didn't exist. Illness or injury meant home convalescence. Perhaps neighbors possessed poultice knowledge. Perhaps relatives remembered prayers to Asclepius' healing deity. Perhaps local temples housed therapeutic serpents for spiritual consolation. Famous Greek physicians combined herbalism, philosophy, and speculative practice. They embraced the four humors theory: blood, phlegm, yellow, bile, and black bile. According to this framework, illness resulted from humoral imbalance. Fevers indicated excessive blood, requiring bloodletting. Respiratory symptoms suggested phlegm excess, requiring fasting. Depression indicated black bile predominance, perhaps addressed through walking or contemplative seaside gazing. Medical treatments were a curious blend of observation, guesswork, and nature's pantry. Physicians might prescribe crushed poppy seeds for pain, boiled figs for digestive ailments, or a compress fashioned from vinegar and mysterious substances harvested from livestock. Efficacy varied dramatically, but discomfort was the one consistent outcome. Surgical procedures remained exceedingly rare, reserved for desperate circumstances when all other options had failed. Without anesthetics or antiseptic understanding, even minor incisions invited potentially fatal infections. The surgeon's arsenal consisted of crude iron implements, bone-cutting saws, and fervent invocations to healing deities. Those requiring limb amputation needed extraordinary courage, preferably a leather strap between their teeth. Childbirth existed entirely within the midwife's domain, a perilous journey, even under optimal conditions. Maternal and infant mortality rates reached devastating heights. A single complication, shoulder dystocia, breech presentation, or prolonged labor often proved catastrophic. Wealthy families might secure a traveling physician with documented expertise and exotic remedies. Common citizens relied on generational wisdom, folk preparations, and sheer determination, or succumbed to complications. One small consolation: Greek medical philosophy advocated adequate rest, fresh air, exposure, and balanced nutrition. Hippocrates gifted posterity his immortal oath, while simultaneously recommending cabbage water as therapeutic intervention. Greek healthcare ultimately represented a precarious amalgamation of rudimentary herbalism, desperate optimism, and remarkable resilience. Theatrical performances transcended mere entertainment in ancient Greece. They represented civic obligation, religious observance, and immersive psychological experience. Begin with the seemingly positive aspect. Performances were provided without charge to citizens. Spectators crowded into massive open-air amphitheaters carved into hillsides. Zeus's Athens' renowned theater of Dionysus pressed against thousands of perspiring fellow citizens. Attendance required extraordinary commitment, literally entire days. The Dionysia festival proceeded uninterrupted from dawn through nightfall with sequential dramatic performances, tragedies, comedies, and satyr plays. No scheduled pauses, refreshment availability, or designated facilities existed. Tardiness or disruptive behavior triggered not merely social disapproval, but potential financial penalties. The performances themselves defied modern theatrical expectations. Tragedies delivered emotional devastation, familial slaughter, psychological disintegration, warfare, and divine retributions spanning generations through ancestral transgressions. Audiences gathered, not for amusement, but collective catharsis through synchronized lamentation. Comedies offered little respite from intensity rather than gentle humor. They delivered scathing satire, targeting political figures, philosophical movements, rival city-states, bodily functions, with merciless precision. Imagine contemporary political satire combined with academic discourse, adorned with exaggerated phallic imagery, and unleashed before thousands. Performers utilize towering masks, elevated footwear, and elaborate costuming, exclusively male actors portraying every role regardless of gender. The chorus functioned as a musical commentator, synchronized movement ensemble, and narrative interpreter, an ancient precursor to social media discourse, albeit considerably more melodious and elaborately attired. Spectatorship demanded active participation rather than passive observation. Audiences responded vocally, hurling verbal criticism, physical objects, and spontaneous debate throughout performances. Theater represented democracy through artistic expression. Offensive content provoked immediate public feedback. Moving performances elicited audible emotional responses and potentially transformative personal reflection. Festival conclusion brought formal judgment, with appointed jurors determining victorious playwrights. Consider experiencing 3 consecutive days of emotional devastation through Orestes' tragic narrative, only to discover ultimate recognition bestowed upon ribald comedy featuring anthropomorphic divine swine. Such was ancient Greek cultural experience. Within the theatrical context, passive consumption remained impossible. One participated actively, potentially armed with surplus olives as projectiles. Having survived immersive theatrical immersion, their journey continues into the agora, the city's pulsating commercial and social nucleus, where unexpected philosophical encounter awaits. An unshod individual draped in simple garments, interrogating passersby about abstract concepts like justice. Welcome to philosophy, an inescapable aspect of Greek existence. Particularly within Athens, philosophical discourse represented competitive intellectual sport, with legendary practitioners whose names now symbolize transformative ideation. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle's contemporary perspective recognizes their profound contributions. Their contemporaries often perceived merely eccentric individuals, prone to excessive verbosity and intellectual intimidation. Consider Socrates, professional practitioner of circular questioning methodologies designed to systematically dismantle conversational partners' epistemological confidence while conducting ordinary commercial transactions or interacting with local fauna. His unexpected appearance might trigger profound existential examination. Do you perceive truth's existence? Perhaps define truth's essential nature? Thus begins protracted intellectual paralysis, potentially culminating in Spartan relocation fantasies. Though creating no written documentation, this responsibility fell to his student Plato. Socrates established enduring philosophical legacy, partially through his eventual execution by Athenian authorities for excessive intellectual provocation. Official charges cited youth corruption and religious skepticism, though historical analysis suggests probable motivation. Relentless interrogative persistence during communal meals. Philosophy in ancient Greece wasn't sequestered in hushed libraries, erupted in the streets like an intellectual thunderstorm. These debates transformed public squares into arenas of thought, where arguments collided with the force of Olympian lightning. No polite academic seminars, here just raw, passionate discourse that left participants transformed or traumatized, sometimes both simultaneously. Imagine walking through the agora, shopping for olives, when suddenly you're drafted into a philosophical battlefield. A barefooted man with piercing eyes asks you about virtue. And before you can formulate a response, you're surrounded by a circle of onlookers eager to witness your intellectual dissection. Plato's Academy wasn't merely an institution you visited, was an intellectual vortex that pulled you in. One careless comment about beauty or justice, and suddenly you're the living embodiment of the unexamined life. While strangers analyze your flawed reasoning, even children weren't immune from philosophical conscription. Consider young Alexander, instead of normal teenage pursuits, found himself under Aristotle's tutelage, receiving lessons that would shape his conquest of the known world. Picture your high school teacher, not just explaining civics, but handing you the reins of empire with the casual instruction, "Go reshape civilization." So, while philosophy bestowed upon us the foundations of logic, ethics, scientific inquiry, and political theory, also delivered existential crises served with a side of public humiliation, typically ministered by a sandal-wearing sage with unblinking intensity and devastating rhetorical precision. Imagine achieving prominence in Athens, respected, articulate, politically adept, but beware, popularity itself became your greatest liability. In this cradle of democracy, excessive influence could result in a decade of exile, not through shadowy conspiracy, but through transparent democratic process. Its peculiar institution, called ostracism, represented democracy's immune system against potential tyranny, and it operated with ruthless efficiency. Once, annually, Athenians gathered to decide whether to conduct an ostracism vote. The assembly agreed. Citizens inscribed upon pottery shards the name of whomever they considered threatening to democratic stability. Accumulate 6,000 votes, and you'd find yourself banished for 10 years, no trial, no appeal, just the democratic will expressed through broken ceramics. The remarkable aspect: you needn't commit any crime. Perhaps you distinguished yourself in battle, demonstrated exceptional oratorical skills, or simply possessed charisma that made fellow citizens uneasy. Your very excellence became grounds for removal. Consider the irony. Aristides, celebrated for his righteousness, allegedly received votes from citizens weary of hearing about his impeccable character. Even Themistocles, the strategic genius whose brilliance saved Athens at Salamis, was eventually ostracized when his influence grew too pronounced. Gratitude, it seems, had strictly defined parameters in democratic Athens. Suicism created a peculiar social tightrope patch of recognition, but avoid inspiring too much admiration. Demonstrate capability without appearing indispensable. Athens thus pioneered not only democratic governance, but also institutionalized suspicion of individual excellence, implementing systematic cancel culture 2.5 millennia before the term existed. Mortality loomed as an ever-present companion in ancient Greece. Life expectancy rarely exceeded 35 years, assuming you survived infancy, which approximately 1/3 of children did not. Disease, malnutrition, and rudimentary hygiene transformed everyday stints into a precarious journey, where each sunrise represented another victory against the odds. Death lurked in mundane encounters, a minor scratch turning septic, an inexplicable fever, childbirth, or simply drinking from a contaminated water source. Medical knowledge provided limited protection, while divine intervention proved notoriously unpredictable. Urban environments magnified these dangers exponentially. Densely populated areas with primitive sanitation created perfect conditions for epidemic spread. The devastating plague that struck Athens during the Peloponnesian War decimated 1/3 of the population, even claiming Pericles himself. The historian Thucydides contracted the disease, survived to document its horrors, and thus preserved for posterity a catalog of symptoms that still haunts medical historians. For men, warfare represented an omnipresent mortality risk, whether clutching a spear in a phalanx or manning an oar on a trireme. Violent death constantly beckoned. Even survivors often succumbed days later to seemingly minor wounds infection, being an invisible enemy against which ancient medicine had few effective weapons beyond prayers and herbal compresses. Beyond these earthly dangers lurked supernatural peril. Divine displeasure, or imagine, could manifest as sudden illness, agricultural failure, or bizarre calamities. Neglect proper sacrificial rituals, speak disrespectfully of immortals after excessive wine consumption, or inadvertently desecrate sacred ground, and divine retribution might arrive as lightning strike, mysterious affliction, or indeed a frenzied stampede of sacred goats. Burial practices weren't merely ceremonial, they were existential imperatives. Without proper funeral rites, coins placed on eyelids for Charon's fairy. The sacred libations, the ritualized lamentations, your eternal fate hung in precarious balance. Those whose families couldn't afford these necessities faced a grim alternative. Bodies unceremoniously abandoned beyond city boundaries, unmarked and unremembered. This transcended mere social disgrace. It represented spiritual catastrophe. The Greeks held firm conviction that souls denied proper burial remained trapped in perpetual limbo, forever wandering the threshold between worlds, finding peace in neither. Death arrived with democratic precision, intellectual achievement, or physical beauty, acclaimed philosophers mid-sentence, athletes mid-stride, and emperors mid-stride, and emperors mid-decree. Your station might determine how elegantly you lived, but it offered scant protection against mortality's countless agents, from spoiled figs to mosquito-borne fevers, from infected wounds to contaminated wells. The 12 Olympians observed humanity with temperamental caprice rather than benevolence. While religious texts might extol cosmic harmony through veneration of Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Poseidon, and their divine companions atop cloud-wreathed Olympus, everyday religious practice more closely resembled perpetual crisis management. These weren't serene, compassionate deities, but celestial narcissists wielding cosmic authority. Neglect to sacrifice, witness your harvest wither. Miscalculate a prayer's wording, so watch your vessel splinter against rocks. Unwittingly trespass on sacred terrain. Choose your punishment: venomous encounter, devastating illness, or agricultural collapse. Religious observance demanded not mere devotion, but meticulous precision, perfectly timed rituals, flawlessly executed ceremonies, and unwavering reverence. No casual, weekly temple attendance sufficed. Instead, daily domestic rituals, household shrine maintenance, seasonal festivals, and civic religious obligations consumed substantial portions of your existence. Before breaking soil for planting, invoke Demeter's blessing. Before military engagement, sacrifice to appease bloodthirsty Ares. Before maritime journey, pour libations to temperamental Poseidon, perhaps supplemented with caprine offering should weather appear particularly threatening. Each deity maintained exhaustive ledgers of favorites and adversaries. Apollo might extend protection over your community, lest your ancestor once offended him, condemning generations to misfortune until appropriate atonement. Hera, nominal patroness of marital bonds, specialized in vindictive persecution of mortal women who attracted Zeus's wandering attention, regardless of their willingness in such divine encounters. Athena bestowed wisdom's gifts generously, while simultaneously transforming presumptuous mortals into arachnids without hesitation. If Olympian surveillance weren't sufficiently anxiety-inducing, lesser divinities saturated every conceivable environment. Satyrs, spirits, river guardians, and monstrous entities lurked in forests, streams, and shadowed corners. A misplaced footfall on consecrated earth might result in supernatural claim to your appendages by vengeful woodland entities. Most disquieting was calamity's inscrutability, divine displeasures. Origins remained persistently mysterious. Was misfortune, punishment for improper offering composition, ritual, timing, error, unconscious divine insult during dream states. Perhaps responsibility lay with kinsman's transgression or ancestral misconduct generations removed. Immaterial, the gods operated through inscrutable yet intensely personal mechanisms. Yet, paradoxically, despite inducing perpetual trepidation, Greek religious traditions permeated every dimension of existence, from political institutions to childbirth practices to athletic competitions. You simultaneously feared and depended upon these immortal beings. Their temples dominated urban landscapes, their festivals structured annual calendars, and their mythologies provided explanatory frameworks for phenomena ranging from atmospheric electricity to romantic attraction. Divine belief arose not from abstract faith, but from pragmatic survival strategy. Having contemplated these realities, sun-scorched dwellings, barley-based sustenance, suit, podiatric suffering, perpetual warfare, epidemic disease, capricious deities, and omnipresent, goat-related misadventures, we must confront our central inquiry. Would your modern sensibilities and constitution withstand even 24 hours in ancient Greece? Candidly, unlikely. Your resilience would falter before midday. The relentless heat, unfamiliar nutrition, omnipresent martial threat, and divine retribution anxiety would rapidly dispel romantic classical fantasies. Your contemporary existence hasn't prepared you for pre-dawn water collection or primitive sanitation facilities shared with consecrated livestock. You'd desperately miss modern plumbing, pharmaceutical analgesics, and the freedom to express dissatisfaction without risking civic banishment via ceramic ballot. Allah, you might romanticize existence amidst marble architecture, philosophical discourse, and poetic excellence. Elect, but such privileges belonged exclusively to societal elites. For the vast majority, reality consisted of agricultural drudgery, curtailed civil liberties, and frequent funerary observances. Democratic participation exclusively for male citizens. Medical intervention, garlic applications, and divine supplication. Theological security, perpetually uncertain. Social discourse, public oration concerning justice principles, delivered by agitated individuals brandishing marine life. Nevertheless, despite these hardships, Greek civilization persisted and flourished. They constructed architectural marvels that defy millennia, composed dramatic works that maintain contemporary relevance, explored philosophical questions that continued to challenge modern thinkers, and established foundations for disciplines ranging from astronomy to ethical theory. They didn't merely endure adversity, they forged civilization while navigating it. Your survival prospects remain minimal. This proved sufficient, not because existence offered comfort, but because they discovered meaning within chaotic reality. They questioned everything, engaged in frequent conflict, created transcendent literature, expired prematurely, yet somehow fundamentally shaped human civilization's trajectory. Realistically, your experience would likely terminate following initial heat exhaustion, caprine encounter, or unsolicited dialectical ambush in public thoroughfares. However, should you somehow adapt, persevere, and attentively observe, you'd find yourself among history's most passionate, resilient, and brilliantly imperfect populations. And remarkably, they wouldn't condemn your struggles. They'd simply provide rudimentary clothing, indicate water-bearing vessels, and instruct. Excellent. Now transport this uphill. The conflagration began with mortality and treachery. Chrysotagus, sovereign of the Iceni, in what contemporary cartography identifies as Eastern England, had navigated Roman politics with remarkable dexterity. For years, he maintained precarious equilibrium as client king beneath imperial shadow, securing wealth, autonomy, and peace through strategic usefulness to the empire. His death circa 60 CE left behind testamentary provisions intended as protective measures for his people. He named the emperor as joint inheritor alongside his daughters. Anticipating this demonstration of loyalty would safeguard their autonomy and sovereignty. His calculations proved catastrophically incorrect. Rome rejected these provisions outright. Rome recognized no negotiation. Rome seized without hesitation. Imperial authorities annexed Iceni territories completely, their legionaries appropriating everything agricultural lands, livestock, residences, and accumulated wealth. Yet property confiscation represented merely preliminary transgression. What followed transformed political subjugation into profound personal violation. They publicly flogged Queen Boudicca merely as punishment, but as calculated humiliation, a demonstration that you exist at our sufferance. Worse still, they sexually assaulted her daughters while forcing her to witness these atrocities. This wasn't mere authoritarian suppression. It embodied systematic psychological warfare designed to shatter collective resistance. The strategy backfired spectacularly. Rather than breaking Boudicca, it transformed her. Roman authorities believed they had subjugated an inconsequential tribal matriarch. Instead, they had awakened a formidable adversary, a queen who would transmute personal anguish into devastating retribution, a mother whose righteous fury would soon engulf Roman settlements in purifying flames, a leader who would demonstrate that even mighty empires remain vulnerable. News of these abominations propagated rapidly throughout Britannia's tribal territories. Other indigenous populations listened attentively. They recalled their own subjugations, territorial dispossessions, and sons sacrificed to Roman imperial ambitions. Rome perceived these tribal peoples as fragmented and disunited, yet suddenly they discovered common cause in Boudica's righteous indignation. The violation of a single queen would culminate in imperial trembling. Rome had destroyed a treaty, devastated a family, and consequently shattered the illusion of Roman invulnerability in Britannia. This wasn't merely tactical miscalculation, it provided the catalyst for one of history's most ferocious insurrections against Roman dominion. If Rome expected Boudica to disappear quietly into history, they gravely misunderstood her spirit. Born not for submission, but for command, she stood defiant. Roman chroniclers, who seldom praised their adversaries, described her as imposingly tall, fiercely determined, with a magnificent mane of red hair flowing to her waist and a voice that commanded attention like a battle horn. She transcended mere nobility. She embodied resistance incarnate. And now she had become Rome's most formidable nightmare. Yet, before becoming Rome's terror, she transformed into something far more dangerous. A mother with everything stolen and nothing to fear. Roman cruelty had attempted to strip away her dignity, destroy her daughter's future, and crush her people's spirit. Boudica, however, refused victimhood. She recognized Rome's greatest fear wasn't military might, whereas tribal unity. With this insight, she began methodically forging an alliance, one tribe at a time. The Trinovantes were first to join her cause. It's powerful. They had been systematically broken by Roman taxation, land confiscation, and forced labor. When Boudica addressed them, she spoke not with diplomatic restraint, but with the raw authority of a warrior, mother-wounded yet unbowed. She evoked their ancestral memories, their displaced gods, and their stolen homeland. Her suffering resonated as their own. Her vengeance became their purpose. Soon other tribes rallied to her banner. The Corytae with their hunting prowess, the fierce Cornavi, even segments of the divided Brigantes. What began as personal retribution transformed into sacred crusade, divine mission to purge Britannia of Roman hubris. She offered no false promises of safety or easy victory, only the chance for glory and an honorable death should fate demand it. They followed her because she embodied true leadership, riding among her warriors rather than commanding from safety. Spear gripped firmly, her distinctive hair flowing free, her gaze fixed, unwavering on the horizon. She invoked the names of the violated, the enslaved, the executed. She called upon Andrist, Celtic goddess of victory, as divine witness. And her warriors believed with fervent certainty that supernatural forces fought alongside them. Though lacking formal military education or Roman tactical manuscripts, she wielded something far more potent, righteous fury, tempered by betrayal, and guided by singular purpose. The very landscape seemed to respond to her will. This wasn't mere insurrection, it was resurrection. Queen Rome, thought broken, had become the vanguard of a movement that would soon shake imperial foundations. The Roman eagle had long cast its shadow across Britannia, but now powerful crosswinds threatened to ground its flight. Boudica's wrath wasn't an uncontrolled blaze, but a gathering tempest, methodical and purposeful. Such storms require sustenance, which came from countless Britons who had awaited generations for someone to challenge. Imperial might someone who spoke not in diplomatic Latin, but through blood and iron. She became their voice, their vengeance embodied. War councils convened beneath ancient oak groves and on moonlit hillsides. Boudica claimed no throne, but stood on equal ground with her people. She absorbed the tribal elders' righteous anger, mothers' profound grief, and druids' prophetic visions. All voices converged on one inescapable truth: Rome had transgressed beyond forgiveness. The moment for retaliation had arrived. Trinavante warriors brought hunting spears, leather slings, and battle chants passed through generations. The Asina contributed cavalry agile riders with ritual war paint and fierce determination. Other tribes joined with stone axes, bronze blades, and burning torches. Women took up arms alongside men, inspired by their warrior queen. This wasn't merely military mobilization. It was Celtic identity, resurrected from subjugation. Rome's advantage remained its disciplined legion's professional soldiers, iron-armored, precisely trained, and lethally efficient. Keitha compensated with overwhelming numbers, intimate knowledge of the terrain, and something Rome couldn't instill through training: hatred born from systematic humiliation. Her force swelled exponentially. Farmers abandoned fields to become warriors. Hunters transformed into assassins. Former slaves and mistreated allies defected to her cause. These weren't mercenaries fighting for coin. They fought for ancestral memory, for vengeance, and for the freedom to raise children beyond imperial bondage. She delivered her inaugural address, the first of many that would echo through history. Roman historians later recorded her words, inevitably colored by their perspective. Yet, one message resonates clearly through the centuries: victory or death. There would be no capitulation, no compromise, no retreat. Her first target materialized: Camulodunum, once a proud British stronghold, now a Roman colony cluttered with imperial temples, statues, and villas. The Temple of Claudius stood as a particular affronted shrine to the emperor who had conquered their lands. To Boudica and her warriors, it represented not sacred space, but imperial arrogance manifested down. It would be first to fall. The tribes no longer whispered rebellion. They marched openly toward it, armed with generational fury and led by a queen who refused subjugation. Camulodunum stood defenseless. The once proud Roman colony had become everything the Britons despised: streets resounding not with native languages, but Latin commands, buildings constructed atop sacred tribal grounds. Smoke darkened the horizon as the colony burned, its inhabitants slaughtered, rebellion's flames reaching skyward. Boudica permitted no celebration. There was no time for it. She anticipated Rome's swift and merciless response, so she pressed onward, understanding that momentum was crucial. Her next objective loomed larger, wealthier, and more vulnerable: Londinium. Rome had dismissed her threat before. They could no longer afford such complacency. Camulodunum was merely prelude. True vengeance required striking at Britannia's imperial heart. Londinium represented Roman Britannia's crown jewel. Though established barely 17 years earlier, it had rapidly developed into a thriving commercial and administrative center. Merchants from across the empire crowded its markets. Officials conducted imperial business beneath tiled roofs. Wealth circulated through its streets like lifeblood. But as Boudica's army approached, prosperity transformed into panic. Governor Suetonius, having hastily returned from Wales with minimal forces, arrived just before the rebellion descended. Surveying Londinium's sprawling, crowded, utterly indefensible, he made a ruthless calculation: abandonment. Roman legions stationed elsewhere couldn't arrive in time. Suetonius refused to sacrifice his limited troops in a hopeless defense, so he withdrew with those able to flee. Left behind were the elderly, the infirm, the stubborn, and those who couldn't believe a woman-led army could possibly defeat Rome. Their education would prove fatal. Boudica's forces descended upon Londinium with apocalyptic fury. No walls required scaling. No gates needed breaching. The city lay exposed, and she extracted her vengeance. Her warriors swept through streets with centuries of accumulated rage. Laden plunder, obliterated. The slaughter proceeded methodically. Roman citizens dragged from homes, entire families executed. Some were impaled on stakes, others immolated in their temples. No mercy was extended. No Roman symbol spared destruction. Villas burned. Warehouses exploded into infernos. Rising smoke columns were visible for miles, black spirals against the British sky. This wasn't mere massacre, it was declaration. The message rang clear: Rome is vulnerable. Contemporary Roman chronicles by Tacitus and Cassius Dio estimated tens of thousands perished. Some accounts suggest the brutality surpassed even Camulodunum's destruction. To Roman sensibilities, this wasn't simply rebellion. It was apocalypse incarnate. Through this carnage rode Boudica, never hiding behind commanders, but leading from her war chariot, daughters at her side. She witnessed imperial pride crumble beneath her vengeance. To her, this wasn't senseless violence, but justice exacted for Roman crimes against her family, her people, her homeland. Yet her retribution remained incomplete, as another Roman settlement awaited, Verulamium, and beyond that, Rome's inevitable counterattack. Rome had confronted countless rebellions throughout its imperial history. Had waged wars across continents and subdued powerful kingdoms. Yet never had it faced anything resembling Boudica's uprising. She possessed no formal military education. She spoke no Latin. She wore no gleaming armor. Nevertheless, she had reduced two significant Roman cities to smoldering ruins and slaughtered thousands of civilians and soldiers alike. Now, as Verulamium, prosperous Romanized settlement northwest of Londinium, erupted in flames, the empire began experiencing something unfamiliar: genuine fear. The echoes of Boudica's devastation reverberated through marble halls in distant Rome. The Senate chambers fell silent as reports arrived from Britannia. Emperor Nero himself, ruler of lands stretching from North African deserts to Germanic mountains, contemplated the unthinkable: complete withdrawal from the British Isles. A single woman with a war chariot and burning vengeance had brought the mightiest empire on earth to contemplate retreat. Boudica's true power transcended her military force. She had become a walking challenge to Rome's foundational myth, their belief in unshakable permanence, in cities that would stand eternal, in destiny manifest through conquest. Yet here stood a Celtic queen, previously flogged, her daughters violated now, reducing Roman colonies to smoldering ruins. Each city she burned represented more than territorial loss. It was a crack in Rome's psychological armor, a tremor beneath imperial certainty. Verulamium soon joined the list of Roman settlements reduced to ash. Once prosperous and thoroughly Romanized, its temples and villas offered no resistance. Boudica's warriors swept through with methodical fury, extinguishing Roman presence with fire and blade. Archaeological excavations today still reveal a stark testament to her rage. A thick layer of charred debris beneath modern St. Albans, where flames once burned so fiercely they scarred the very earth. Yet victory carried within it the seeds of defeat. With each conquered settlement, Boudica's coalition grew more unwieldy. Her army swelled beyond manageable proportions, while supply lines stretched dangerously thin. Discipline wavered as success bred overconfidence. Tribes, once united in purpose, began pursuing individual glory. Meanwhile, Rome, which had survived Hannibal at its gates and endured civil wars, was methodically regrouping. Governor Suetonius moved with calculated precision. His tactical retreat wasn't surrender, but strategy. Drawing battle-hardened legionaries from garrisons across the province, he rebuilt his forces while identifying optimal terrain for confrontation. Yet, despite Roman discipline and experience, one question haunted every legionary's thoughts: could they halt this unstoppable Celtic fury? For Boudica had accomplished the impossible. She had proved that Rome could bleed, that queens could challenge emperors, that history's course could be rewritten by those meant to be conquered. The inevitable clash approached as imperial might prepared to meet tribal wrath. The flame of rebellion had consumed all available fuel. Now it would face the empire's iron response. Governor Gaius Suetonius, Spolinessa, veteran commander, tempered by campaigns in North Africa, elected his battlefield with strategic brilliance. While Boudica's followers celebrated past victories, He chose a narrow ravine flanked by dense forest, neutralizing her overwhelming numerical advantage. His force numbered perhaps 10,000, fraction of Boudica's horde, but each man represented Rome's greatest military asset, disciplined, professional soldiers trained to fight as a single organism. Boudica commanded what ancient sources claim was 200,000 warriors, though modern historians suggest a smaller but still overwhelming number. These weren't professional soldiers, but farmers, craftsmen, tribal warriors, united by righteous fury but lacking cohesive training. They believed their sheer mass would obliterate Roman resistance like an ocean wave against sand. This fatal miscalculation would determine Britain's fate for centuries. Before battle joined, Boudica delivered her final address, standing tall upon her war chariot, daughters beside her, her voice carried across the assembled tribes. She invoked their collective suffering, the scars of flockings, the violations, the stolen lands, the desecrated, sacred groves. She called upon Andrist, goddess of victory, and pledged that this day would end in either triumph or honorable death. The tribal roar that answered her shook the earth beneath Roman feet. Then came the collision of worlds. British warriors charged with unbridled ferocity, their battle cries piercing the air. But Suetonius held his ground. He had positioned his legionaries perfectly in the narrow passage, allowing Boudica's forces to advance until they became compressed in the constricted terrain. Then, with precision timing perfected through centuries of warfare, he unleashed Rome's deadly machine. Javelins darkened the sky before raining down. Shield wall locked into place. Short Roman swords gladly thrust with mechanical efficiency into the compressed mass. Wave after wave of Celtic warriors crashed against disciplined Roman ranks, only to break like surf against cliffs. Then came the counterattack. The legions advanced not in wild charge, but in measured steps, shields locked, swords stabbing in ruthless rhythm. Behind the British lines, families who had followed to witness expected victory became a deadly trap. Warriors couldn't retreat past wagons and civilians. Panic spread like contagion. The battlefield transformed from contested ground to killing field. When silence finally descended, tens of thousands of British bodies carpeted the blood-soaked earth. The rebellion had been crushed. Rome had bent but refused to break. Boudica had hurled everything against imperial might, and though military victory eluded her, she had inscribed her name into history with fire and defiance. Her ultimate fate would remain contested, but her legend was already carved into Britain's soul. Battlefield silence eventually replaced war's cacophony, punctuated only by the wounded's diminishing cries. Boudica had lost not merely a battle, but a revolution, sparked by her own indomitable will. The ground, soaked crimson with tribal blood, bore silent witness as Celtic dreams dissipated into the British mist. In Boudica herself, she vanished from historical record. No contemporary witnessed her final moments or recorded her death with certainty. Roman chroniclers offer contradictory accounts. Some claim she consumed poison rather than face capture. Others suggest illness claimed her during the chaotic aftermath. All sources agree on one crucial fact: she disappeared. No triumphant Roman general paraded her in chains through Rome's streets. No public execution provided imperial closure. Like a tempest that expends its fury, she simply ceased to be. Yet, in this mysterious disappearance, lay the seeds of immortality. She transcended mortality to become legend. Rome, shaken by the magnitude of her rebellion, attempted to erase her memory, but succeeded only in elevating it. Boudica's name survived in tribal songs, whispered around fires, passed through generations in sacred groves. To conquered Bretons, she represented not defeat, but defiance incarnate, a martyr, a near deity of righteous vengeance, a mother who challenged history's most formidable empire and forced it to acknowledge her fury. Even Rome's own historians granted reluctant recognition. Tacitus, despite his Roman loyalty, portrayed her not as barbarian, but as a legitimate leader wronged by imperial excesses. Cassius Dio described her imposing physical presence and electrifying oratory. Rome feared her rebellion, yet couldn't help but admire her resolute spirit of quality Romans themselves claimed to embody. Boudicca's legend transcended death, flowing through the veins of history like an undying river. While Rome's legions could conquer land, they failed to vanquish her memory. She resurged magnificently in Victorian-era monuments, breathed new life through Tennyson's poetic verses, commanded pages in scholarly tomes, and inspired generations of schoolchildren. For women especially, Boudica became more than a historical figure. She embodied the eternal flame of resistance that no oppressor could extinguish. Her war chariot, with its deadly, spiked wheels, cut not just through Roman forces, but through time itself, becoming an enduring symbol of defiance against tyranny. Rome perceived these tribal peoples as fragmented and disunited, yet suddenly they discovered common cause in Boudicca's righteous indignation. Though her mortal remains vanished into history's shadows, her voice resonates, still howling with the wind across British moors, crackling in hearth fires and whispering through the hearts of all who face oppression yet refuse to surrender. Her unspoken anthem echoes, "I will not kneel." The centuries have rolled onward since Boudica disappeared into Britain's ancient mists, yet her presence remains palpable across the isles she once defended. Her name stands immortalized in stone monuments, her spirit invoked in parliamentary debates, her essence woven into the fabric of British identity. Near Westminster Bridge in London, bronze captures her eternal defiance standing resolute on her war chariot, daughters at her side, gaze fixed on distant horizons, wheels poised for battle. Modern Londoners and tourists pass beneath, unwittingly walking through the ghostly echoes of her rebellion's fury. Boudica's significance transcends mere commemoration. She evolved beyond her historical role into something more profound and eternal challenge that confronts every empire, every system of oppression, every ruler who forgets the dangerous power of those they silence. What happens when the voiceless find their battle cry? Boudica, however, refused victimhood. She recognized Rome's greatest fear wasn't military might, whereas tribal unity. With this insight, she began methodically forging an alliance, one tribe at a time. Her story carries complexities that resist simplification. Her campaign left trails of devastations, cities reduced to ash, thousands slaughtered, mercy seldom shown. Yet history's pages are rarely filled by saints there, inscribed by those who dare defy established orders. And such defiance rarely comes without bloodshed. What truly makes Boudica immortal isn't merely her military campaign against Rome, but the inextinguishable flame she kindled in humanity's collective imagination, a woman stripped of everything who transformed devastation into strength, a queen who refused to let an empire define her fate, a mother who forged unbearable grief into a weapon that nearly brought Rome to its knees. Contemporary historians continued dissecting her tactical decisions, questioning her motivations, debating her historical significance. But ask ordinary Britons about Boudica, and they won't recite academic footnotes. Their answers speak of the queen who made mighty Rome tremble, the warrior who unified fractious tribes into a formidable force, the leader who demonstrated that dignity can rise phoenix-like from the ashes of devastation. Thus, she transcends mere historical figure to become an eternal symbol of rebellion, courage, and unyielding freedom. Though Rome eventually rebuilt its colonial cities and redrew imperial maps, it could never erase her. The spirit burns in every struggle against oppression, in every voice that refuses silence, in every soul that chooses death with dignity over life on bended knee. Boudica's mortal journey ended, but her legend gallops eternally onward. To ancient peoples, illness represented more than random misfortune or biological malfunction. Those explanations would wait millennia to emerge. In antiquity, sickness manifested as something deeper, fundamental imbalance, a cosmic disruption between body, mind, soul. in the natural order. Mesopotamian healing traditions viewed disease primarily as divine retribution. When illness struck, the fundamental question wasn't about symptoms, but transgressions. Which deity had you offended? What sacred boundary had you crossed? What curse pursued you? Diagnosis began with spiritual interrogation, not physical examination. Priests and healers worked in tandem, reading omens, performing incantations, and conducting purification rituals alongside administering herbal remedies. Ancient Chinese medical philosophy approached balance with mathematical precision through intricate systems of yin-yang polarities and five-element correspondences. Health represented harmonious equilibrium between opposing cosmic forces, sex, heat, or cold. Dryness or moisture would cascade through the body's systems, triggering disease. Chinese healers approached even simple ailments holistically. Cough wasn't just a symptom, but a story that required understanding of when it began, which hours saw it worsen, what emotions accompanied it. Treatment encompassed herbs, acupuncture, and dietary adjustments, all working together to realign one's internal universe. In Greece, Hippocrates revolutionized medicine by rejecting supernatural causation. It still viewed health fundamentally as harmonious balance. Its four humor, theory blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile dominated Western medicine for nearly 2 millennia. Each humor corresponded to specific temperaments and elements. Their balance determined not just physical health, but emotional disposition. Excess black bile didn't just cause physical symptoms, created the melancholic personality itself, across diverse cultures separated by vast distances. One fundamental concept remained consistent. Health meant wholeness, not merely absence of suffering, but presence of balance. Whether through India's Ayurvedic doshas or African spiritual healing traditions. Ancient peoples understood humans not as isolated beings, but as integral components of nature's web. When nature's order was disturbed, the human body reflected that disturbance. So when ancient healers approached the sick, their diagnostic gaze penetrated beyond visible symptoms to invisible forces. They understood intuitively that genuine healing required treating both tangible wounds and intangible imbalances with equal care and reverence. In the shadow of towering pyramids, where the Nile's life-giving waters nourished civilization, Egyptian medicine blossomed as an exquisite dance between empirical science and mystical enchantment. The SWNW Egyptian healers weren't mere practitioners of physical remedies, but sacred vessels bridging mortal flesh and divine will. Their hands worked with earthly herbs, while their spirits communed with gods, creating a medical tradition both remarkably sophisticated and deeply spiritual. To walk as a patient in ancient Egypt was to understand that your body's ailments reflected a greater cosmic narrative. A broken limb wasn't simply shattered bone, it was a disruption in the invisible threads connecting you to the afterlife, the gods, and the eternal order. This holistic perspective survives in the magnificent Ebers Papyrus, a medical treasure from around 1550 BCE, containing over 700 magical medical formulas, addressing everything from throbbing toothaches to sinister tumors growing within the body's hidden chambers. Egyptian physicians wielded copper tools, heated in sacred flames, their hands steady as they drained angry abscesses, set fractured bones, and closed gaping wounds. Their diagnostic methods were surprisingly methodical, checking the rhythm of life in pulsing veins, scrutinizing bodily fluids for telltale signs, and cultivating a pharmacopoeia of healing plants that modern pharmacists would recognize. Yet before any herb touched flesh, divine blessing was essential. Though thy besetted master of wisdom had bestowed medicine's secrets upon humanity as a sacred gift, fearsome Sekhmet, with her lioness visage, commanded both devastating plagues and miraculous recoveries. As herbs were pressed to feverish skin, healers murmured ancient words, not as mere superstition, but as powerful sonic medicine. Vibrations that realigned the universe itself. Their medical arsenal featured golden honey natures, liquid amber applied to wounds centuries before microbes were glimpsed by human eyes. This sweet antiseptic, sometimes blended with tree resins or lint, created barriers against invisible threats. Pungent garlic and onions strengthened weakened hearts. Castor oil purged intestinal impurities. And most remarkably, bread, darkened with healing mold, was pressed into festering wounds. Intuitive discovery of antibiotic properties millennia before Fleming's penicillin. Such was their reputation that foreign rulers dispatched urgent messengers across scorching deserts, seeking Egyptian physicians for their most perplexing ailments. Egyptian medicine pioneered specialization, with healers dedicating their lives to mastering specific bodily domains. Eyes that could no longer see the sun, stomachs that rejected nourishment, or souls troubled by spiritual afflictions. Through it all, they maintained an unshakable belief in the unity of physical symptoms and metaphysical causes. A persistent fever might arise from mosquitoes breathing in Nile waters, or the restless spirit of an ancestor demanding proper offerings. Healing wasn't simply eliminating symptoms, but restoring the cosmic harmony underpinning existence itself. The true healer's purpose transcended mere curing. They were cosmic realigners, reweaving the patient back into the tapestry of divine order. While Egypt's medical traditions flourished along the Nile, across distant mountains and valleys, India was crafting its own remarkable healing system, one that viewed humans not as isolated beings, but as living mirrors reflecting the universe's vast patterns. This profound approach became Ayurveda, literally the science of life. Emerging from the sacred Vedic tradition, Ayurveda transcended mere medical practice to become a comprehensive philosophy, guiding humans toward harmony with nature's rhythms, seasonal cycles, and spiritual energies. At Ayurveda's heart beats the elegant theory of three dashas: Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and Kapha, biological energies, representing unique combinations of the five cosmic elements. Vata, composed of air and ether, orchestrates all movement, from dancing thoughts to circulating blood. Pitta, embodying fire and water, governs transformative processes like digestion and metabolism. Earth and water Kapha provide structure, stability, and nurturing protection. Each person emerges into existence with an individual dosha fingerprint, their Prakriti. Disease manifests when this natural balance becomes distorted through improper diet, environmental influences, emotional turmoil, or spiritual disconnection. The ancient text, Charaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita medical encyclopedias compiled over 2 millennia ago reveal a system of breathtaking sophistication. These weren't merely collections of remedies, but comprehensive manuals encompassing herbal pharmacology, surgical techniques, obstetric care, psychological healing, and even ethical codes for physicians. Chaka, master of internal medicine, emphasized prevention as the supreme healing art. Meanwhile, surgical genius Sushruta detailed over 300 precise surgical procedures and more than 120 specialized instruments crafted from wood and metal, preserved in texts, while his contemporaries in other civilizations left scant surgical records. Perhaps Sushruta's most astonishing innovation was rhinoplasty, art of reconstructing severed noses, using skin flaps harvested from the patient's cheek or forehead. This wasn't vanity surgery, but compassionate restoration for those who had suffered disfiguring punishments or injuries. While European surgeons would marvel at such techniques, centuries later, Ayurvedic surgeons had already perfected them in ancient India. Yet Ayurveda's true brilliance lies not in any single technique, but in its unwavering commitment to holistic healing, treating not isolated symptoms, but the interconnected web of body, mind, and consciousness. Ayurvedic treatments unfold as a symphony of complementary approaches, potent herbs prepared with mathematical precision, flowing oil massages that release toxins from deep tissues, purifying yoga postures, conscious breathing techniques that harmonize pranic energy in periods of therapeutic fasting, sacred plants like golden turmeric, revitalizing ashwagandha, purifying neem, and protective tulsi, weren't regarded as mere botanical substances, but as embodied divine intelligence, offering their healing wisdom to humans. An Ayurvedic healer addressing fever might prescribe cooling herbs while simultaneously adjusting the patient's sleep patterns, exploring emotional imbalances, and kindling the digestive fire essential for transformation. The profound teaching at Ayurveda's core remains revolutionary even today. You are not separate from nature. You are nature expressing itself in human form. When illness arises, it is existence itself calling you back to balance. In the mist-shrouded valleys and mountain temples of ancient China, its healers developed a revolutionary understanding of health that transcended visible anatomy. They recognized that beneath flesh and bone flowed qi, the vital life force animating all existence. This invisible energy current moved through every living being along specific pathways called meridians. Perfect health existed when qi flowed smoothly without stagnation or excess. This profound insight became the cornerstone of traditional Chinese medicine, one of humanity's oldest, continuously practiced healing systems. Chinese physicians approached healing as cosmic detectives, studying nature's grand patterns to decode human health. They observed seasonal transitions, lunar cycles, animal behaviors, and celestial movements with meticulous attention. From these observations emerged two foundational frameworks: the dynamic interplay of yin and yang polarities, and the generative cycles of the five elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and watering, corresponding to specific organs, emotions, seasons, tastes, and colors. The elegant philosophy of yin-yang balance provided a sophisticated language for describing health and disease. Yin, qualities: cool, receptive, inward, feminine, darkness, complemented; yang, attributes: warm, active, outward, masculine, brightness. Every bodily organ, emotion, and function existed somewhere along this spectrum, constantly seeking equilibrium. This perspective transformed diagnosis. A fever wasn't merely elevated temperature, but excessive yang energy requiring cooling yin therapies. Chronic fatigue indicated depleted yin essence, needing nourishment and conservation. Diagnosis in Chinese medicine elevated observation to an exquisite art form. Physicians relied on for examinations, studying the tongue's color, coating, and shape. Listening, noting voice quality and breath sounds, asking detailed questions about symptoms, emotions, and dreams. Attention, with the subtle language of the pulse at multiple positions along the wrist, each revealing different organ systems conditions. These techniques required decades to master, yet required no technology beyond the healer's refined senses. The Chinese healing arsenal comprised elegant, sophisticated interventions targeting qi flow. Acupuncture, the strategic placement of hair-thin needles at precise points along meridian pathways, could unblock stagnant energy, redirect excess, or tonify deficiencies. Moxibustion burning mugwort herb near specific points seduced warming yang energy to cold deficient conditions. Cupping created therapeutic suction to draw out stagnation, while herbal formulas combining dozens of ingredients restored balance through complex synergies. Daily practices like qigong movements and dietary therapy empowered patients in their own healing journey. The landmark text Huangdi Neijing, compiled around 2 millennia ago, remains TCM's philosophical foundation. It's far more than a medical manual. It presents an integrated cosmology where health reflects harmony between human microcosm and universal macrocosm. Its profound insights recognized how emotions directly impact physical organs: anger, damaging the liver; grief, weakening the lungs; fear, depleting the kidneys. True healing required not just addressing physical symptoms, but restoring emotional and spiritual equilibrium. This ancient wisdom, anticipated by thousands of years, what modern medicine now confirms: the inseparable connection between emotional states and physical health. Chinese medicine wove an intricate tapestry where humanity and cosmos were one unbroken thread. To heal the body was to harmonize with seasons, soothe the spirit, and rebalance the invisible currents flowing beneath the skin, with each pulse beneath their fingertips. Ancient healers believed Ki whispered its secrets to practitioners. Sacred duty was simply to listen with perfect attention. As Mediterranean sunlight bathed the marble columns of Greece and later illuminated Rome's grand forums, medicine began its gradual migration from divine mystery toward rational inquiry. Yet even in this intellectual revolution, the body remained a delicate microcosm governed by equilibrium and temperament. At the heart of this worldview pulsed a theory destined to shape Western healing for millennia: the doctrine of the four humors. Hippocrates, the revered Greek physician, laid the foundation that Roman doctors like Galen would later fortify into an elegant system. They proposed that four essential fluids orchestrated the symphony of human health: sanguine blood, phlegmatic mucus, choleric, yellow bile, and melancholic, black bile. Each humor danced in partnership with a cosmic elementaire, fire and earth, and manifested a distinctive temperament. Perfect health bloomed when these fluids existed in harmonious proportion. Illness was simply the body's cry against imbalance. A patient burning with fever and quick to anger betrayed an excess of yellow bile, a fiery disharmony requiring cooling remedies. Meanwhile, the lethargic sufferer with pale complexion might be drowning in excess phlegm tied to water and coldness. Treatments thus focused on restoring the body's internal equilibrium through precise interventions: strategic bloodletting to reduce excess, carefully formulated purges, customized dietary regimens, and therapeutic baths to coax the body back toward balance. Yet Greek medicine extended beyond bodily fluids to embrace the healing power of environment and meticulous observation. The Hippocratic oaths, echoes still reverberating through modern medical ethics, commanded physicians to first do no harm, to watch their patients with unwavering attention, and to treat not merely isolated symptoms, but the entire person. Hippocrates instructed his disciples to consider everything: seasonal shifts, prevailing winds, water quality, and even the patient's emotional landscape. Scattered across the sunlit Greek countryside stood the Asclepi healing sanctuaries, named for Asclepius, god of medicine. These were far more than primitive hospitals. They were sacred spaces where healing transcended the physical. Patients slumbered in dream incubation chambers, awaiting divine guidance for their recovery. Ritual purification, prescribed movement, dietary wisdom, and devotional prayer formed a holistic therapeutic approach. Here, in these sacred grounds, reason and faith walked as companions rather than adversaries. Rome's contribution to this medical evolution crystallized in the brilliant mind of Galen, a Greek physician whose skills served both bloodied gladiators and imperial rulers. His anatomical investigations through animal dissections, prolific writings spanning hundreds of medical texts, and systematic codification of humorism transformed medicine across the empire. Though modern science would later reveal flaws in his understanding, Galen's intellectual shadow stretched across medical thought for nearly 15 centuries. Greco-Roman medicine, despite its roots in mysticism, pioneered a revolutionary concept that the human body represented a system intricate and mysterious, yes, but ultimately comprehensible through careful study. When properly understood, health could be restored not solely through divine intervention, but through the physician's reasoned approach, therapeutic rituals, and the meticulous art of healing. Long before written medical treatises and formalized academies, indigenous peoples across continents cultivated profound healing traditions, wisdom transmitted through oral narratives, dreamtime visions, and intimate communion with the natural world. For these diverse cultures, medicine transcended occupation to become a living philosophy woven seamlessly into seasonal ceremonies, daily practices, and sacred rituals. Among Native American nations, healers, though often called medicine men and women, fulfilled roles far beyond physical caregiving. They served as spiritual intermediaries, keepers of tribal stories, counselors through life's transitions, and guardians of ancestral knowledge. Illness in these traditions revealed itself not as mere biological malfunction, but as a fracture in relationship with the natural world, with community bonds, with ancestral spirits, or with one's authentic self. True healing demanded more than herbal remedies. It required restoring these severed connections. Plant medicines formed the cornerstone of indigenous healing arts. From Cherokee forests to Lakota plains, each tribe cultivated encyclopedic botanical knowledge perfected across generations. Which alleviated pain, which leaves reduced fever, which bark accelerated wound healing. Sacred plants like sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and tobacco became bridges between worlds during smudging ceremonies that purified both physical form and spiritual essence. Yet, indigenous medicine recognized that plants alone couldn't restore wholeness. Intention, ceremonial context, and proper respect for the medicines were equally essential. Healers worked in conscious partnership with spiritual forces through carefully orchestrated ceremonies. Sweat lodges created purifying crucibles of transformation. Vision quests facilitated direct communion with helping spirits, and rhythmic drumming ceremonies realigned energetic patterns. Some illnesses originated in taboo violations, unwelcome spirit attachments, or soul lhasa, profound spiritual wound, where essential aspects of selfhood fled during traumatic experiences. In such cases, soul retrieval ceremonies called back the fragmented self through the healer's journey into non-ordinary reality, manifested through chanting, trance dancing, or shamanic voyaging. This profound reverence for nature's healing wisdom emerges consistently across indigenous traditions worldwide. Deep in Amazonian rainforests, shamanic healers work with plant teachers like ayahuasca nut as recreational substances, but as sacred medicines that reveal the spiritual roots of suffering through visionary experiences. In Australia's timeless landscapes, Aboriginal healers practice bush medicine, combining specific plants, healing clays, and ceremonies, transmitted through dreamtime stories that connect present healing to ancestral beginnings. Wellness arises from balanced relationship between physical body, traditional lands, ancestral presences, and the songlines that map both physical and spiritual geographies. These sophisticated healing systems never required written codification. They lived vibrantly in ceremonial songs, sacred dances, and the embodied landscapes of indigenous territories. From this perspective, while modern medicine offers undeniable technological wonders, indigenous healers remind us of a profound truth. The earth itself constituted humanity's original pharmacy. And genuine healing isn't merely about conquering disease. It's about remembering our fundamental interconnectedness with all of creation, across the diverse tapestry of ancient civilizations, regardless of language, geography, or cosmology. One profound conviction remained constant. True healing demanded more than physical interventions. It required spiritual restoration. Whether illness manifested as divine punishment, energetic imbalance, broken harmony with sacred forces, ancient peoples recognized that genuine healing began in the invisible realms. The gateway to these unseen dimensions was ritual, the bridge between worlds. In ancient Mesopotamia, long before standardized medical practices emerged, communities turned to Zapu and AC to combat illness. Disease was understood as an invasion by malevolent spirits or the consequence of divine displeasure. Clay tablets preserve intricate healing ceremonies or precisely formulated incantations accompanied herbal applications. Clay figurines were ritually buried beneath homes to intercept sickness before it reached the inhabitants. Ritual wasn't merely supplementary to treatment, it constituted the essential core of the healing process. Egyptian medicine similarly wove spiritual practice into every healing encounter. No physician would apply medicinal honey to wounds or bandage injuries without first invoking divine protection prayers to Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, or Sekhmet, the lion goddess who could both inflict and cure disease. Illness represented more than physical disruption, it signaled cosmic disharmony. Healing required realigning the patient with the math of fundamental principle of truth, cosmic order, and universal harmony that sustained creation itself. Throughout Africa's diverse cultures, specialized healers, known as Ngangas, Sangomas, Our medicine people employed sophisticated divinatory techniques, rhythmic drumming, and sacred dance to diagnose and treat ailments. They communicated directly with ancestral spirits, summoned protective entities, and often entered altered consciousness to journey through spiritual landscapes on behalf of their patients. While plant medicines played crucial roles, spiritual consultation always preceded physical treatment. Even in classical Greece, where rational medicine began its ascendance, ritual remained central to the healing process. Within the Asclepia healing temples, dedicated to Asclepius patients, underwent elaborate purification rites, fasting disciplines, and devotional practices. As night fell, they participated in enkoimesis, dreaming beneath statues of the healing god. These divinely inspired dreams were carefully interpreted by temple priests to guide subsequent treatment approaches. Ritual was never mere superstition. It provided essential structure to the healing journey. Through symbolic ceremony, suffering gained meaningful context. A cane found expression beyond words. An illness acquired purpose within a larger narrative. Through carefully choreographed symbolic actions, fear transformed into hope, isolation dissolved into community connection, and chaotic suffering yielded to renewed sense of order. Perhaps most importantly, ritual reminded the suffering individual of a profound truth. In their darkest moments of illness and vulnerability, they were never truly alone. Even today, science investigates what the ancients intuited: the placebo effect, the healing power of belief, the tangible impact of intention. These ancient healers needed no clinical trials to understand a profound truth. Sometimes a word whispered with reverence can mend deeper than any surgical tool. For not all wounds manifest visibly, and not all medicine takes physical form. When we contemplate ancient surgery, our minds often conjure primitive implements, unsteady hands, and excruciating torment. Yet reality tells a far more remarkable, far more human story. Throughout the ancient world, surgical arts flourished with astonishing precision. These pioneering healers lacked anesthetics, radiography, and antimicrobials, but possessed something equally powerful: extraordinary skill, unwavering courage, and a profound understanding of human anatomy earned through centuries of observation, experimentation, and often bitter necessity. In India, the Sushruta Samhita medical treasure penned over to millennia ago meticulously documented more than 300 surgical interventions. Its visionary author, Sushruta, now revered as surgery's founding father, described sophisticated techniques for tumor excision, hernia repair, and even rhinoplasty, pioneering reconstructive surgery. His surgical arsenal was diverse and specialized: precisely crafted forceps, razor-sharp scalpels, delicate probes, and fine needles fashioned from iron and stone. Sushruta insisted upon rigorous hygiene, methodical preoperative preparation, and comprehensive anatomical understanding through dissection, though ethical considerations often limited this practice to animals. His surgical wisdom transcended geographical boundaries, eventually permeating both Islamic medicine and Western surgical traditions centuries later. In ancient Egypt, surgical knowledge intertwined seamlessly with sacred ritual. Papyrus manuscripts revealed detailed procedures for wound, suturing, joint realignment, and abscess drainage. Archaeological discoveries have unearthed sophisticated tools, bronze blades, precision bone saws, and cauterizing implements preserved in burial chambers. Egyptian surgeons even performed trepanation, the deliberate creation of cranial openings, to alleviate pressure or treat traumatic head injuries. Remarkably, numerous skulls exhibit clear healing patterns, confirming patient survival. This daring cranial procedure wasn't exclusive to Egypt. In pre-Columbian Peru, archaeologists have unearthed hundreds of trepan skulls, predominantly from battle-wounded warriors. Some ancient surgical interventions achieved startling success rates in specific regions. Over 80% of patients survived, evidenced by bone regeneration patterns. These remarkable success rates suggest these early surgeons likely employed coca leaves or fermented maize beverages as primitive anesthetics. Alongside herbal antimicrobial preparations. In the Greco-Roman world, Galen revolutionized surgical methodology by studying wounded gladiators and performing systematic animal dissections. His groundbreaking insights into neurological pathways and vascular systems established foundational principles for subsequent anatomical understanding. Roman military surgeons treated battlefield trauma with remarkable efficiency, employing cauterization, vascular clamping, and sophisticated ligature techniques. While surgery invariably carried profound risks, it commanded universal respect, sacred domain, reserved for those courageous enough to navigate the threshold between life and suffering, seeking to extract healing from pain. These weren't crude butchers, but rather artisans of the healing blade. Though their knowledge had boundaries, their legacy endures whenever a surgical instrument is wielded in service of healing rather than harm. Today, we inhabit a medical landscape of digital diagnostics, robotic surgical systems, and genomic mapping technologies. We can visualize internal structures within seconds and transmit prescriptions across continents with a simple keystroke. Yet, in the quieter corridors of modern medicine, ancient wisdom continues to resonate. Ayurvedic principles find expression in contemporary wellness centers. Traditional Chinese herbal formulations line pharmacy shelves, and indigenous purification ceremonies occur within hospital settings to honor patients' cultural traditions. Medical graduates still solemnly recite modernized versions of the Hippocratic Oath, pledging primum non nocere first, do no harm, just as their Greco-Roman predecessors once did. In today's operating theaters, precision instruments trace their evolutionary lineage directly to Sushruta's iron implements. Concepts now celebrated as revolutionary holistic care models, preventative medicine protocols, and mind-body integration are deeply rooted in ancient healing traditions that understood medicine not as a mechanical intervention, but as a sacred relationship. Contemporary scientific research has completed a remarkable circle. Modern studies increasingly validate what ancient healers intuitively recognize, that psychological stress, social isolation, and emotional trauma profoundly impact physiological immunity, disrupt circadian rhythms, and manifest as physical pain. Meditation practices, once exclusively spiritual disciplines, now undergo rigorous neurological study for their measurable effects on brain health and cognitive function. Forest bathing, derived from Shinto traditions and indigenous nature connection, practices is now prescribed for anxiety disorders by mainstream physicians, and the placebo effect healing, catalyzed primarily by belief, continues to confound researchers who once dismissed it as mere suggestion. It's tempting to dismiss ancient medical practices as primitive superstition, folkloric tradition, or rudimentary guesswork. Yet, deeper examination reveals something profound. Holistic paradigm that understood illness not as mere mechanical dysfunction, but as fundamental disruption in being, a signal that something, somewhere, had fallen out of harmony. This perspective remains vitally relevant because medicine transcends treatment protocols, encompasses meaning-making, comfort, provision, and the profound human need to be witnessed and comprehended. Ancient healers grasped this instinctively. Whether employing rhythmic incantations, acupuncture needles, botanical preparations, or surgical implements, they recognized healing as fundamentally sacred. Today, as we advance deeper into biotechnological frontiers, artificial intelligence applications, and personalized medicine paradigms, perhaps we aren't abandoning ancient wisdom, but rather circling back to it equipped with sophisticated tools, but guided by the same eternal human spirit that yearns for equilibrium, integration, and healing that encompasses not merely physical restoration, but spiritual wholeness. Her name floats through the corridors of history like a haunting melody half remembered. Sappho, lyric poetess of Lesbos, born approximately 630 BCE, his voice once captivated listeners beneath Aegean starlight, and whose fragmentary verses still reverberate with exquisite longing across millennia. Unlike the celebrated warriors and monarchs of ancient Greece, Sappho's immortality stemmed not from conquest, but from emotional authenticity. Her dominion was not the battlefield, but the labyrinthine human heart. She composed of love and jealousy, beauty and desolation, exultation and yearning. She immortalized life's ephemeral moments, lingering glance, a telltale blush, an involuntary trembling, preserving them in poetic amber like delicate blossoms, fragile yet eternal. Though history grants us only whispers of her existence, no portraits to study, no diaries to pore over, Sappho endures through fragments that shimmer across millennia. What remains are precious traces, verses preserved by ancient scholars, quotations embedded in other texts, and delicate papyrus remnants rescued from oblivion. Yet even these fragments radiate with brilliance. Plato, awestruck by her artistry, elevated her to divine status as the 10th muse. Through centuries, poets, translators, and dreamers have pursued her elusive legacy, reconstructing her life verse by verse, like musicians piecing together a symphony from scattered notes. Born to nobility on Lesbosan Island, cradled by the Aegean's azure embrace, Sappho entered a world where poetry pulsed through daily life like a heartbeat, though historical records offer only tantalizing glimpses. We know she navigated a complex existence, possibly with siblings and a daughter, certainly with political adversaries. Her life's tapestry included bitter exile and triumphant return, periods of enforced silence and moments of transcendent song. How most women's voices remained confined to domestic spheres, Sappho's refused such boundaries. Her defiance came not through overt rebellion, but through artistic excellence. Composing in the melodic Aeolic dialect, she crafted intimate lyrics meant for the lyre's accompaniment. Her verses shimmered with vivid imagery. Evening star, you bring back all that the shining day has scattered, words that would outlast marble monuments and bronze statues. Then, like twilight fading to darkness, she vanished from historical record. Those centuries have claimed most of her works, burned by zealots, buried beneath sand, dismissed by scholars. What survives testifies to her immortality. She needed no grand edifices. Poems became her eternal monument. Today, when we speak of passion expressed in verse, of love embraced without shame, of longing that transcends time itself, we unconsciously echo Sappho's voice across the centuries. To comprehend Sappho fully requires understanding Lesbos, the island that nurtured her genius. Far from peripheral in the ancient Greek world, Lesbos flourished as an artistic and intellectual haven. Its landscape, lush valleys, silver-leaved olive groves, and shorelines where sea-scented breezes mingled with floral fragrances, offered both natural splendor and cultural richness. Unlike Athens, with its philosophical gravitas, Lesbos moved to its own cadence, more languid, sensually attuned, deeply rooted in lyrical tradition. Here, music transcended mere entertainment to become spiritual practice. The delicate notes of lyre and aloes resonated through households and sacred spaces alike. Poetry wasn't read silently, but sung aloud. And amid this symphony of sound and nature, Sappho's distinctive voice emerged. She made her home in Mytilene, the island's vibrant capital, where political intrigue intertwined with artistic innovation. The cultural landscape teemed with poets and philosophers, competing factions and shifting loyalties. Political upheaval once forced Sappho into exile, possibly to Sicily. Yet Lesbos eternally beckoned. Her return wasn't merely her homeland, but her perpetual inspiration. Uniquely in the ancient world, Lesbos fostered spaces where women could gather in community. Aristocratic young women received education in music, poetry, and religious ritual. Many scholars believe Sappho herself led the Assosa circle, or school, where women cultivated lyric poetry, dance, and devotional practices honoring Aphrodite. This wasn't formal education by modern standards, but rather a sacred artistic sisterhood where profound bonds formed, intellectual, emotional, and perhaps romantic. Sappho addressed these women directly in her poetry, not as abstract ideals, but as beloved individuals inhabiting her daily reality. She called them by name, lamented their absences, celebrated their beauty, and revealed her affections with startling candor. In one heartbreaking fragment, she writes, "I have not had one word from her. I beg you, bring her back to me." Such lines emerge not from mythological invention, but from lived experience women gathered by lamplight, transforming emotion into song, so later generations would distort her legacy with scandal and speculation. Lesbos provided the fertile soil from which her authentic voice grew, not merely a geographical location, but a cultural sanctuary where female expression, artistic innovation, and emotional honesty could flourish. Sappho didn't merely inhabit Lesbos, she embodied its very soul, breathing life into its culture and giving voice to its hidden heartbeats. While Homer's thunderous epics celebrated battlefield glory and Olympian drama, while male historians meticulously documented conquests and political machinations, Sappho dared to journey inward. She mapped the intricate terrain of human emotion with the precision of a master cartographer. Her verses captured not clashing spears and thundering hooves, but the subtle tremor of fingers touched by desire. The electric moment when eyes meet across a crowded room. The way a beloved's voice could send shivers cascading through the body like rainfall, pioneering the first-person perspective in Western poetry. She didn't merely observe life, she inhabited it completely. Her words pulsate with raw, emotional truth, the intoxicating rush of new love, the exquisite ache of longing, the venomous sting of jealousy, the tender caress of affection, and the all-consuming fire of desire. What truly set Sappho apart in the ancient world was her audacity, not just as a poet, but as a woman who wrote fearlessly about women. And in Athens, where female voices were muffled behind domestic walls, where public discourse and artistic expression remained firmly male domains, Sappho carved out something revolutionary. She didn't storm the agora with demands for equality. Instead, she created something more powerful, a realm where emotion wasn't weakness but strength, where female experience wasn't peripheral but central. Her poetry didn't beg for space in the masculine literary tradition. It simply created its own universe where women's inner lives mattered profoundly. Within this self-created sanctuary, Sappho performed her most radical act. She named and honored the women she loved. 8. These weren't abstract muses or convenient literary devices. They were flesh and blood women with distinctive laughs, signature perfumes, and particular ways of arranging their hair. In one heart-wrenching fragment, she writes, "He is equal to the gods. That man who sits beside you, who listens to your sweet voice and watches your lovely laughter." Here, we witness Sappho as the silent observer, watching the woman who captivates her speaking with someone else. The jealousy she conveys isn't dramatic or vengeful, it's achingly human, a quiet suffering instantly recognizable across millennia. In just a handful of lines, she distills the essence of unrequited love, that universal ache familiar to anyone who has ever loved without reciprocation. Her erotic writing never descended into vulgarity. Instead, it elevated sensuality to an art form. She portrayed intimacy with the painter's delicate touch, the elegant curve of a neck, the peaceful vulnerability of sleep, moonlight's silver kiss upon bare skin. For Sappho, beauty and intimacy were inseparable, two aspects of the same divine experience. This refusal to compartmentalize earned her censorship and misinterpretation through subsequent centuries. Some scholars attempted to erase her queerness. Others transformed her loves into heterosexual tragedy. But none could diminish the fundamental truth of her voice, a woman who wrote about love not as philosophical concept, but as lived experience, with courage, lyricism, and unapologetic authenticity. Sappho's genius extended beyond mere poetry. She created multi-sensory experiences that nourished the soul. Her verses were never intended for silent contemplation on parchment. In ancient Greece, poetry breathed, moved, and resonated through the air. Sappho mastered the lyric form, intimate and intensely personal compositions performed with the lyre's accompaniment. This small stringed instrument nestled against the performer's body, beat gently plucked as the voice carried words across the space like fragrant blossoms on a sea breeze. This marriage of music and language birthed the very concept of lyrical poetry. Unlike the sprawling epics with their gods and battlefield heroes, Sappho's creations were intimate conversations, whispered confessions, love letters sung beneath swaying olive branches or in lamplit chambers. In this realm of emotional expression, Sappho reigned supreme, unchallenged. Technical brilliance was equally remarkable. Composing in Aeolic Greek dialect with distinctive melodic qualities, developed what we now call the Sapphic stanza. This metrical pattern flowed with hypnotic rhythm, 3 longer lines culminating in a shorter 4th line, like a profound thought concluding with a tender sigh. The effect was subtle, yet profoundly musical, mimicking the cadence of breath exchanged between lovers in moments of quiet intimacy. She would perform, surrounded by women students, companions, perhaps devotees of Aphrodite in gatherings that transcended mere entertainment. These were sacred spaces where emotion, music, and physical presence fused into something whole and holy. Through these performances, Sappho wasn't simply creating poetry, she was cultivating a distinctive artistic tradition, training new voices to carry forward her revolutionary approach to emotional expression. We can only imagine the sensory richness of these performances, the delicate resonance of lyre strings, the clear, melodic rise of her voice, the reverent stillness of her audience hanging on each syllable. Many of her compositions began not with declarations, but with questions or invocations, creating the intimacy of conversation or prayer. Come to me now, O golden-throned Aphrodite, and free me from hard care. These words reached simultaneously toward divine heights and into the depths of human desire, yet they feel astonishingly contemporary. Her compositions could be set to modern music and still evoke primal emotional responses. Sappho's genius lay in transforming poetry into song, demonstrating that human emotion itself is a kind of music that every heartbreak, every whispered endearment, every tremulous confession deserves its own melody. Hers continues to resonate across 26 centuries. For every preserved line of Sappho's poetry we treasure today, countless others have vanished into the void of history. What survives are mere fragments, brilliant shards of emotion and sound torn from their original context, drifting through time like scattered stars. Some remain as complete stanzas, others are mere whispers, a solitary word, a fleeting sentiment, a conclusion without beginning. Yet, even these broken pieces radiate with remarkable vitality, like embers still glowing among the ashes of a once magnificent fire. What catastrophe claimed so much of her work? The culprits were manifold: time's relentless erosion, warfares, destruction, and deliberate censorship. Sappho's complete works once filled 9 precious volumes within the legendary library of Alexandria. These were diligently copied and performed throughout the classical Mediterranean. But when that great repository of knowledge fell, countless literary treasures perished with it. Later, as Christianity established cultural dominance, works deemed pagan or morally questionable faced systematic suppression, neglected by copyists, excluded from curricula, or intentionally destroyed. Sappho's frank expressions of passion, particularly same-sex desire, made her especially vulnerable to this purge. By medieval times, she had become a literary phantom. Her name survived in scholarly references, but her authentic voice had been all but silenced. Her work survived only through fortunate accidents of preservation. Some fragments endured because ancient grammarians, rhetoricians, or philosophers quoted her verses to illustrate linguistic points or literary techniques. These citations, focused on style rather than emotional content, nevertheless preserved the passion burning beneath technical excellence. Then came extraordinary archaeological discoveries. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, excavations in the sands of Oxyrhynchus, Egypt, unearthed thousands of papyrus fragments from ancient garbage heaps. Among these discarded scraps were precious lines of Sappho poetic treasures unseen for over a millennium. The discoveries continued into modern times. In 2004, scholars identified a nearly complete Sapphic poem preserved on papyrus wrapped around an Egyptian mummy in a German collection. Each recovery feels like resurrection, yet the vast majority of her work remains lost. We experience her today through echoes and fragments, yearning not just for what she wrote, but for all she might have expressed had history allowed her voice to reach us intact. Yet there's poetic justice in this fragmentary survival. Sappho herself wrote eloquently about transience, about beauty that blooms briefly, about moments of connection that slip through our grasp like fine sand. Perhaps it's fitting that her legacy reaches us not as an imposing monument, but as a beautiful mystery, a mosaic pieced together by devoted lovers of language, music, and emotional truth. Her voice, once nearly extinguished by time and intolerance, continues to burn with remarkable intensity, proof that authentic expression, even fragmented, possesses extraordinary durability. Sappho's verses too, radiant with truth, could never escape history's judgment. In her lifetime, she stood crowned with laurels, celebrated as the master of lyric poetry. Plato himself elevated her beyond mortal genius, naming her the 10th muse, a divine presence among mortals. Yet, as the centuries unfurled and empires rose and fell, her legacy became a battlefield where each new era waged its own war against her honesty. Why? Because she wrote of love with such searing clarity, not the kind of love history was comfortable preserving. Her poetry pulses with undisguised affection and desire for women. With delicate precision, she immortalized their beauty, lamented their absence with inconsolable grief, confessed the sharp pangs of jealousy, and celebrated intimate moments with unashamed tenderness. In her world, the aristocratic circles of ancient Lesbostes, profound, emotional, and romantic, its bonds between women were not merely tolerated, but flourished as natural expressions of the heart. Yet later, civilizations, Roman, Christian, Victorian, recoiled from these expressions, unable to reconcile them with their narrowing definitions of acceptable desire. Rather than confront the mirror she held to human emotion, successive generations mutilated her story. Medieval scribes passed over her work in conspicuous silence. Renaissance scholars diluted her passionate language into pale imitations. Victorian critics, perhaps most desperate of all, fabricated an entirely fictitious tragedy that she, consumed by unrequited love for a ferryman named Finn, hurled herself from the Leucadian cliffs into oblivion. Key, this fabrication appears nowhere in her authentic fragments. Key, the purpose was transparent: to erase her queerness, to domesticate her passion into heterosexual disappointment, to make her story palatable for proper drawing rooms. Some academics reduced her art to mere pedagogical exercises. Others dismissed her outright as morally corrupt, a voice too dangerous to preserve. And yet, like a stubborn melody that refuses to be forgotten, Sappho persisted. Even as scandal clung to her name, it ensured her survival. During the Victorian era, when discussions of same-sex desire remained strictly forbidden, her legacy became a secret emblem, a coded language for queer identity. The very words sapphic and lesbian evolved directly from her name and homeland, becoming linguistic sanctuaries for experiences that had no other safe harbor in language. Without ever intending such a role, she became a beacon of resistance, a poetic ancestor to countless voices silenced by convention. The questions still echo across millennia. Who was this woman truly? A teacher? A lover? A myth manufactured by later imaginations? A threat to established order? Perhaps we should ask instead, why does her honesty still discomfort us? Sappho wrote beyond categories and classifications. She captured emotion in its raw state, not as society dictated it should be, but as it actually existed in the human heart. She named beauty without apology, confessed longing without shame, and lived through verse with radical authenticity. Her supposed scandal was never in her actions, but in her refusal to disguise truth with acceptable fictions. She dared to write desire exactly as she experienced it, and for this audacity, centuries of gatekeepers tried to silence her, yet her voice continues to resonate, impossible to extinguish completely. If one divine presence enveloped Sappho's creative universe, was Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, and irresistible desire. To Sappho, Aphrodite transcended mere mythology. She was confidant, muse, and spiritual companion through passion's brightest ecstasies and darkest heartbreaks. Many of Sappho's most luminous verses aren't simply about love. They are intimate conversations with the goddess herself, fervent prayers, desperate pleas, poetic negotiations offered when desire's weight became too crushing to bear alone. In her most celebrated surviving composition, Ode to Aphrodite, Sappho addresses the goddess not with distant reverence, but with the familiar urgency of one calling on a trusted friend who has witnessed this suffering before. Come to me now. Ever you have answered my voice in the past. Free me from hard care. Fulfill all that my heart longs to achieve. There exists no shame in this vulnerability, no hesitation in acknowledging desire's power. Sappho's conception of love carries no taint of sin or weakness. It stands as something sacred, powerful enough to summon a goddess from her celestial realm into human experience. In the ancient world, Aphrodite's domain extended far beyond romantic sentiment. She governed the mysterious forces of attraction, the art of seduction, the electric chemistry between bodies, and the hollow ache of separation. To invoke her was to acknowledge that love's power could wound as deeply as it could elevate. Sappho captured this essential duality with unmatched precision. She never idealized love as purely gentle or nurturing. She inhabited its contradictions fully. She sang of its sweetness and its venom, its transcendent beauty and its cruel indifference. In another fragment, she writes with startling intensity, "Love shook my soul like the wind on the mountain troubling the oak trees." Here, love appears not as a gentle emotion, but as an elemental force, violent, overwhelming, sweeping through the self without permission or warning. By placing Aphrodite at the center of her emotional cosmos, Sappho elevated human longing into something approaching the mythic. Her verses dissolved the boundaries between personal experience and divine presence, between ordinary emotion and cosmic significance. In doing so, she helped construct a literary tradition where love transcended mere theme to become a form of worship itself. For Sappho, Aphrodite was no abstract deity confined to temples. She was a mirror reflecting back all the intensity, confusion, and beauty contained within the human heart. And in every line of Sappho's surviving verse, you sense the goddess listening attentively and responding with equal passion. Like her poetry itself, Sappho's death remains shrouded in mystery and myth. No historical record confirms when she died, her age at death, or even where she spent her final days. Some accounts suggest she died peacefully on her beloved Lesbos, embraced by the sea breezes and melodic traditions she had enriched. Other narratives, particularly those crafted by later Roman poets, wove dramatic legends that she, consumed by hopeless passion for the handsome ferryman Finn, leapt to her death from the white limestone cliffs of Lefkida. Yet no historical evidence supports this tale. It emerges clearly as literary invention, deliberate, kempt by male-dominated tradition to reframe her emotional life and artistic legacy into a heterosexual tragedy they found more comprehensible. This fabrication twisted the powerful poetic voice of a woman who loved women into the familiar archetype of a woman destroyed by unrequited love for a man a conveniently neat conclusion, but a false one. The truth, while less dramatic, carries deeper significance. Sappho slipped from history's stage as quietly as she had entered it. After her death, her artistic legacy flourished for centuries. Philosophers studied her metrical innovations, playwrights quoted her verses, and performers sang her compositions throughout the Hellenic world. Her complete works filled 9 precious volumes, treasure house of lyric genius. For a time, her cultural importance rivaled Homer's, but history rarely preserves voices that challenge its fundamental assumptions. As the Roman Empire expanded and Christian moral frameworks later gained dominance, Sappho's openly emotional and sensual poetry, especially works celebrating female love, fell increasingly from favor. Scribes no longer copied her collections, allowing irreplaceable volumes to decay in libraries destined for destruction. Some scholars believe church authorities intentionally suppressed her works, viewing her celebrations of physical beauty and same-sex desire as dangerous to established moral order. By the medieval period, while her name persisted in scholarly references, her actual words had largely vanished. More than 1,000 years would pass before fragments of her verses re-emerged, some excavated from ancient Egyptian rubbish heaps, others preserved as quotations in ancient grammatical treatises. Fragment by precious fragment, she returned to the world not through legend, but through remarkable survival against overwhelming odds. Though her death remains lost to history, her disappearance was never complete. She lingered in whispered references, in lines hastily copied into margins, in the persistent resonance of voices that refuse total erasure. Sappho required no heroic death narrative. Her poems themselves achieved immortality. And in the tantalizing gaps where her complete works once existed, you can still sense the distinctive shape of her artistic spirit, yearning, unfinished, yet impossibly enduring. Though Sappho's biography remains obscured by time's shadow, and her verses survive only in fragments, her influence burns with undiminished brilliance. If anything, it is only intensified across centuries, like a flame that, rather than fading, somehow grows stronger despite every attempt to extinguish it. Each generation has discovered her anew. Renaissance humanists pored over her surviving fragments, marveling at her exquisite emotional precision. Romantic poets like Byron and Shelley invoked her name as patron saint of lyric intensity. During the 19th and 20th centuries, conversations surrounding gender and identity gradually reawakened. Sappho emerged as a powerful symbol of queer resilience, feminine artistic authority, and emotional authenticity in defiance of repression. Her very name lives embedded in modern language. Sapphic, describing romantic love between women. Lesbian, derived from her island birthplace, now a globally recognized identity. These terms transcend mere vocabulary. They are living echoes of her existence. It's a testament that a single poetic voice can reverberate across millennia and fundamentally reshape how humanity conceptualizes love and expression. Artists across disciplines continue drawing inspiration from her presence. Painters have imagined her beneath Mediterranean moonlight, lyre in hand. Poets have translated her fragments countless times, each version striving to capture the elusive pulse beneath her words. Contemporary authors have reimagined, reclaimed, and resurrected her through novels, musical compositions, and dramatic works. Through this enduring fascination, one truth remains luminously clear. Sappho speaks to something fundamentally universal in human experience. The fragmentary nature of her surviving work matters little. The biographical uncertainties fade to insignificance. What endures with undiminished power is the emotional current flowing beneath her words, the trembling exhilaration of desire, the hollow ache of separation, the sacred quality of beauty recognized and honored. These experiences belong to no single time or place. They are emotions we all carry, though few have found such perfect expression for them. Perhaps this represents her truest immortality, not marble monuments or academic footnotes, but the way verses penned over 26 centuries ago can still cause a reader to pause, breathe deeply, and feel suddenly less alone in their most private emotions. Sappho's ultimate gift transcended mere poetry. It was presence itself. She transformed feeling into art. She elevated longing into profound truth. And in doing so, she became more than a distant literary figure. She became an eternal mirror for for anyone who has ever loved deeply, quietly, or in defiance of the world's expectations. As long as human hearts continue breaking and healing through language's power, Sappho will remain not merely remembered in the abstract, but intimately, viscerally felt. As our journey through ancient Greece draws to a close, the oil lamps flicker low, casting long shadows across our understanding of this civilization that gave us so much, yet lived with so little. It's like the Greeks themselves. We've wandered through their harsh realities, from cramped homes to strigil-scraped skin, from barley-bread breakfasts to social inequities that persist in different forms today. Their worlds, simultaneously brilliant and brutal, reminds us that human history isn't a steady march toward comfort, but rather a complex tapestry woven with contradictions. The same minds that contemplated the cosmos slept on straw pallets. The same society that birthed democracy embraced slavery. The same culture that created timeless art and architecture struggled with basic hygiene. Perhaps as you drift toward sleep tonight, comfortable in your modern bed with its pillows and clean sheets, you might appreciate the distance between their world and yours. The daily comforts we take for granted, running water, climate control, dental care, would seem like divine gifts to even the wealthiest Athenian. As Morpheus beckons you toward dreams, remember that we are connected to these ancient people, not just through philosophy and art, but through our shared humanity, our struggles, our resilience, our capacity to find meaning even in difficult circumstances. Sleep well, dear listener. May your dreams be sweeter than watered wine, and your morning brighter than an Aegean dawn. Until our next historical journey, keep a good night.